Hello everybody, Ian Maddox, HMFP Financial Planning Simplified video series, connecting with you during our shelter in place in what I thought was an appropriate place, my house, as the backdrop. It's another beautiful day here for spring, and we've lucked out on the weather the last 4 or 5 weeks that we've shot outside, which is awesome. The news feed obviously is absolutely inundated with things about the economy, about the markets, about disease and pandemic, and just on and on and on and on. And I'll tell you that from my observation, much of that news for the first 4, 6 weeks, 8 weeks even, was very negative. And fortunately, we're starting to get some hope, some bright and positive news that's mixed in. Unfortunately, some of that seems to be conflicting, and it depends partly on which part of the country you're in, what city you're in, what region you're in. And I want to continue to offer some local commentary, both for our clients and folks that are in our sphere of influence. But I will tell you that we're also going to try to get back to some of our educational content as well. This is obviously a historic event, particularly in modern history, and so we'll continue to cover some of this, whether it be economics and markets, whether it be local and community activities, just the disease as a whole and what kind of our viewpoint is on it. But again, we'll get back to some of those educational content as well. So let's go ahead and jump in, and let's talk a little bit about this kind of mixed good news, bad news scenario. So on one hand, you have a company like Gilead Pharmaceutical that now has a antiviral that seems to be showing success, and for all intents and purposes, the market's up today, likely because of that, right? And then you have, on the flip side, you have China showing us what their GDP has done in the last 3 months, which is a profound move. In the last quarter of 2019, China was up somewhere around 5-6% in GDP growth, and they've literally reversed all of that and then gone negative 6%. So you're talking about a delta or change of almost 11 or 12% on their GDP growth, which has never happened for as long as they've measured China's GDP. Back to 1992, we've never had that negative print. So what does that mean about the U.S. economy? All I can tell you is that we are in recession. I don't know what the metrics are quite yet. No one does, and we don't know how deep it's going to go. But that's a huge move for China, and I don't think it should be a surprise to us that ours will be a huge move as well. Keep in mind, I mentioned this on our previous video, that at any given time, the market may do something that doesn't make sense according to what you're seeing economically or the news feed. Sometimes the markets will move and you'll say that makes sense. Something positive happened, the markets are up. Sometimes it'll do the exact opposite. Something positive will happen, markets will drop, vice versa. Something negative will happen and markets will go up. So just realize that there's a lot of data trying to be absorbed. Again, as I've mentioned many times in the past, be sober-minded and all of that. We'll get through this. Now, let's talk about opening the economy, and I think this is an area that I personally have some mixed feelings on. There is no doubt that we cannot perpetually keep everybody on lockdown. It's not possible. There aren't enough dollars for the government to provide to the citizens to make this work forever. Businesses have to get back up and running. The concern I have, and I'm sure this is the one that's being communicated by doctors and scientists, is that as we do this, even if it's a scaled approach, which I'm sure it will be, that's what's being talked about in Washington. Even this morning, our governor and a task force was on TV here in Alabama talking about a scaled approach, specifically some medical practices, dentists that may be able to go back to work as soon as May 1. But you guys have got to be saying, we all do, I'm speaking to myself as much, you've got to continue to keep your distance. You've got to continue to wash your hands because there's still so much about this disease we don't know, and it can mutate. So what we don't want to happen is that in the hopes of bringing the economy back online, that we have a resurgence of disease. So I think that's something just to keep in mind, that this is not like, hey, we're just going to open a door and the floodgates open and it's all back to normal. It's just not going to work that way. So be sane and be sane in what you're doing and continue to follow the directions. Now, the CARES Act, a couple more things I want to touch base on before we close out here. This is a piece of bad news, unfortunately, is that the SBA loans, the allotment of $350 billion ran out yesterday morning. It was announced that they had filled their allotment. And I know that is frustrating. For those of you that got in, great. And I know that money will start to be funded, but I also know of folks even here locally that had applications in that they got cut off and they got notices that said you didn't qualify, we ran out of money. So hopefully the government may be looking at, I know they are looking at bolstering that and adding some back in. I will tell you a piece of good news is that, and I mentioned this in my previous video, that the IRS has launched the Get My Payment app, so to speak. If you'll just Google IRS Get My Payment, it will bring you to a page. It's got everything you need there for your specific individual stimulus check, okay? Both checking the status of your payment. I pulled it up. I've already looked at it this morning. All the lines are there. You put in a social security number, you put in your name, your address, click go, and it will tell you what's going on with your particular payment. Now, they're also on that page. If you haven't filed, I've mentioned this several times, if you haven't filed, there's an application process so that you can get into the system and then be able to come back and check your status. So if you've already filed in 2018 or 19, you can go check your status now. If not, you need to file and then come back to it. But the site is up and running. It's working. One point of clarification, and I work with young people at church, small group, seniors in high school to be specific, and I have a daughter that's a 12th grader, and the question has come up, hey, I'm 17, 18, 19, 20, do I get a stimulus check? And unfortunately, there's a little black hole there where you're over 16 and not quite 23, where you're not likely to get a stimulus check because you're still probably being claimed by your parents. They can't get a benefit because you're too old for it. It's kind of this weird little loophole. So if you're a college age, maybe a junior or senior in high school or college age student, unless you file on your own and your parents don't claim you, you're not going to get a stimulus check. So I just wanted to make that clear to everybody. Lastly, and this is the most important part of my message, this is just another positive kind of encouragement by Ian Maddox, by HMFP, by our team, is essentially to be smart, continue to be safe, and be kind to each other. Until next time, Ian Maddox.